done. I don't think it's ever going to change, Tim. I think people will complain about this, but unless people change their physical schedule, we're always going to have to adjust to the sun, right? The sun does its own thing. We always keep our schedule the same, and maybe it's us that should change and not the clock.
It's the one thing everybody loves to complain about and everyone loves to argue about, but no one really knows the right fix. And I find a lot of times, I could talk about this all day, I find a lot of times people don't even know what they're arguing for.
Yes.
They just say, well, they should stop doing that. And then I say, okay, well, what should they do? This big bad they. Who? What should they do? Well, we should just keep it the same. Okay. Well, do you want an 8:45 sunrise in the winter? No, I don't want that. Okay. Well, do you want a 7:45 as the latest sunset in the summer? Well, no, I don't want that either. Okay. Well, maybe we should keep switching. You have to pick one because you have to have one or the other. It's up to you.
Yeah, I think you're so right, because I see people argue about it at both time changes, and sometimes you're right. They're arguing for the wrong change, right? They like one, but they're arguing against the one they like. And it's like, oh, I think you want this one to be the one you want. But I will say this, living in the Carolinas and the Southeast, and you'll see people in beach towns in particular, Tim, they tend to be a fan of daylight saving times because it extends that daylight in the tourist season, right? When people can enjoy the beach. I know as a golfer, I can tell you for sure the golf courses love daylight saving time. You know how much more money they make because of people golfing after work? It would have a huge economical impact on them. So there are certain industries that have a vested interest in those later sunsets. But for most of us, like you said, I think it's just something to complain about.
It's always fun to complain. People will always do it for sure. I'm okay with it the way it is. I really treasure those 8:00 sunsets in the summertime personally. Yes. You go to a baseball game, the sun's going down. There's just something, culturally about that feels kind of right, and I don't really want the sun coming up at 5 a.m. So that's just me, but everyone's entitled to their opinion. You can call your senators, I guess, if you want them to try, but I don't think that'll work either.
And there's always that one person, Tim, who wants, let's do 30 minutes 4 times a year. It's like, no. Let's just get it all done at once, right?
We just talked about Newfoundland, who has that half time zone. Maybe we could do that sort of thing.
I'm sure we'll argue more about this weekend. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow. We've got more news coming up after the break.
Welcome, everybody, here to WCNC Plus, taking over the news here for the next 2 hours. Man, a rough game for Charlotte FC, their first playoff game against New York City. I'm going to toss things to Jeb Goldman as we talk about what could be another game and how they're going to win the next game. Jeb?
Yeah, Colin, it should be a really, really interesting match. And actually, to join me to talk about the game, I'm joined by Tony Husband, who'll be calling the away fixture. And Tony, let's not sugarcoat things, all right? It wasn't the performance we were hoping to see in this first game against New York City FC. What does Charlotte need to do to get it right in the away fixture, a place we've already lost this season?
Yeah, that's right. And if you don't want to sugarcoat things, that's all good. Yeah, it wasn't very good. It was poor. It was a poor display at home, playoff game. Dean Smith said today, that his team had worked all season, 34 games, 19 wins, many of those at home, to get themselves into a position to have that home field advantage in the playoffs, and they kind of tossed it away in one particularly bad half this week at Bank of America Stadium. So they've got to improve. They've got to be much better. They're going to have to take the chances. They're going to have to create more chances. They're going to be playing at a baseball field, don't forget, at Yankee Stadium, which is quite tight. The dimensions of the field are narrower. But they will have Wilfried Zaha back, and he brings that little bit of quality, that little bit of magic that Charlotte are going to need now if they're going to get themselves back into this series and keep their season alive.
And there are 2 points there that I really want to kind of hit on. We're getting Wilfried Zaha back. Obviously, he's so phenomenally dangerous in those wide areas, but playing New York City FC, those wide areas virtually non-existent. So what does Wilfried Zaha, hopefully playing with a chip on his shoulder, what does he need to do to really impact the game in a place that he's not had a lot of, and really none of the Charlotte wingers have had a lot of success in recent history?
Well, right now, Jeb, there's a big debate in the world of football, and those who follow soccer very closely will know about this, about how much goals are coming from set pieces, how much the more direct play is actually yielding rewards, no matter what league you're watching across the world. Wilfried Zaha, 125 times he was fouled during this season, the most of any player in MLS. He's already the most fouled player in Premier League history when he played at Crystal Palace. Now, he will win set-piece situations in key areas of the field. And it could well be that at a field like Yankee Stadium, sometimes it would be a set piece that could make the difference. He wins the ball in dangerous areas. He operates around the edge of the penalty area. He beats players, but when he doesn't, they tend to foul him. So that will set them up for set-piece situations and potentially a route back into the game.
That it's an interesting take. I mean, I know we look at Arsenal in the Premier League, who may win a Premier League title based on set-piece dominance alone. We'll see. But it's similar in that I think Charlotte FC could replicate that level of success with a very tight defense and phenomenal set pieces. Let's talk about that defense for a second, because that goal was awful. I mean, I think if my youth soccer coach would have seen that happen when I was 12 years old, I would have heard an earful. I imagine Dean Smith was giving our defenders, Malanda and Tim Ream, an earful themselves. Are we nervous about the defense? We can't be giving up those kinds of goals. What do you think he's telling them to get them back on the right track?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was either wonderful to watch or awful, depending on your perspective on it. But yeah, I mean, it was a nice piece of skill from Alonso Martinez. He's kind of almost nutmegged an entire player rather than just put it through the legs. But you would have expected a better challenge. I mean, you shouldn't let a player, and certainly a team of Charlotte's defensive capabilities should not have been able to let a player effectively go and retrieve the ball, turn around, run into the box, and actually run straight past everyone without touching it. He finished it well, he took it well, but yeah, he should have been tackled, and that wasn't good enough. I think I would want to put that down as a bit of a blip for what has been generally a pretty good back line for Charlotte this season. Christian Kalina had that little spell out of the side earlier in the year, but for the most part, he's one of the best goalkeepers in MLS. Tim Ream brings so much experience. Malanda is that good that he will obviously depart for pastures new in Europe at the end of this season. So, you don't want to be bidding farewell to him with a game in Yankee Stadium this Saturday. You at least hope it's going to come back to Bank of America Stadium. So I wouldn't be overly concerned. Defensively, this is a pretty good group. I think Toffolo's been a good addition as well. Byrne, for me, is a steady Eddie kind of player. He's got good quality. He's played at good levels. They're a good group. But the margin for error and mistakes this weekend is that much smaller now.
with a goal being an absolute necessity, I think I speak for all Charlotte FC fans when I say we don't want this game to go to penalties. We don't have a good track record and history in penalties. Obviously, last year, very disappointing against Orlando. Goal necessity. Do you think we need to make it like Brandt Bronico coming in for the injured Pep Biel? Is that the right move at 10? I know there aren't a ton of options, but maybe giving Archie Goodwin, who we obviously brought in, a young player with a lot of potential. Do we want to see more offense, or do you think Dean Smith will stick with a very similar lineup to the one we saw on Tuesday?
Well, I asked Dean Smith that exact question in a conversation today. And considering that this is now season on the line kind of stuff, does he throw in a surprise? Does he change something? Does he, in some ways, NYC caused a surprise with their team lineup in Charlotte? Will Dean Smith throw a name in there into the starting 11 that perhaps we didn't expect? Now, he wouldn't tell, but at the same time, that I suspected from his answer that he's not going to do that. I mean, we all know Wilfried Zaha, as he's available, is going to return for sure. But I think it'll be limited pretty much to that, because I think Dean Smith, the point he made in response to my question about that was very much, look, we lost the game 1-0. We didn't play well first half. We played much better second half. And if we tidy up a few things, then we can win this game. He said they expect to go to Yankee Stadium, win the game, and bring it back to the bank for a game 3. And I think if they do that, at that point, the momentum in this series will be very much back in Charlotte's favor. So I suspect, certainly for the first 45 minutes to an hour, if it stays tight, he's going to stick with more or less what he knows. But of course, as things get later in the game, if it's on the line, and nobody probably wants penalties. I did that game in Orlando last year when Charlotte just couldn't score a penalty barely. Right. I think Ashley Westwood was the only player who did. They're not going to want history to repeat itself. Penalty shootout defeat, I think, as well against Chivas in Leagues Cup at the bank this season as well. So, yeah, history not necessarily on Charlotte's side when it comes to a shootout. So, they want to win it in 90 minutes. But I think he's going to stick to true form when it comes to his lineup.
And let's talk about Idon Toklamati. I mean, he was an absolute resurgence this year. Many, myself included, believe he was snubbed from a nomination for Young Player of the Year, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that it was really the second half of the year where he erupted. Do we need to be seeing more from him? Obviously, without Wilfried Zaha, he wasn't getting the kind of service we were hoping for. But, there were some opportunities, I thought, especially in that first half and in the second half as well, where he could have made different decisions and maybe been a little more dangerous on the pitch. What do you, as someone who's watched a lot of MLS this season, knows a lot about Charlotte FC, what do you want to see from him this weekend against New York City?
I want to see a calm head when it matters. I think he still can get a little bit hot at certain times in the game. He just needs to keep his head, stay calm, but still seize the moment and have that urgency. Because, yes, he could be one of the big keys. Everyone talks about Wilfried Zaha, but, Toklamati came in, took the mantle really from Patrick Agyemang after his sale. But I think that a lot within the Charlotte camp were very high on Toklamati and his ability. Still a young player. He's got a good future ahead of him. He's already proved he can score goals. He just needs to now keep his composure together, and when the chance comes, take it for Charlotte this weekend. And I'm pretty confident he can do that. I think he's a player who, he's just still learning to kind of rise that big occasion, that big moment. And no better learning curve now than being in the MLS playoffs with your season on the line, because, if he doesn't perform on Saturday, well, he's going to be sitting on his sofa until February next year, basically.
Absolutely. I'm joined now by Tony Husband with the MLS. Thank you so much for taking the time with us. Tony, before we let you go, what should Charlotte FC fans be looking out for? I think a lot of people are going to be watching this game on TV. There are a lot of watch parties. I know there's one at the Carolina Theater that they're planning out. It's going to be a big day in the Queen City. What do you think fans should be watching out for that maybe we haven't really talked about yet?
Well, and it's, we very much look forward to the broadcast on Apple TV and people watching from all over the world to see what can happen in this game. It's such an iconic venue at Yankee Stadium. We've talked a little bit about the dimensions of the field and how that sometimes plays as a small factor into these kind of games. I'm looking at the first 15, 20 minutes of this match, and I'm looking to see if Charlotte can match the kind of intensity and the way that New York went about Charlotte in the first game. I want to see that from Charlotte. I want to see a front foot start. I want to see a real determination. And I think we might just get an idea in those first 15, 20 minutes whether Charlotte have licked their wounds from the first game and just how much they're hurting. I mean, Dean Smith said today that they're an angry bunch. They're smarting from that first game. Well, they need to now show that they mean business, because it's all on this. So I'm looking, a lot of it is going to be that body language and that intensity from the kickoff, because they're going to have to take the game to NYC a little bit. I don't think they're going to be panicking, but at the same time, they've got to try and set out a statement for the game in a difficult environment and prove that they can get through this game and take it back to the bank, where, as I mentioned, I think if they can do that, I think then they go into game 3 favorites.
And to your point, I think if we really do come in with that momentum next Friday at the bank, may be the best atmosphere in the MLS this season. Let's hope it happens. Tony Husband, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you, and we're looking forward to hearing you on the call.
No problem. Look forward to it, and I hope everyone enjoys the game.
We will. Hopefully we will.
For Charlotte supporters. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
For a win, we're going to take a 2-minute break. We'll come back right after this, guys. Welcome back. We're going to go to the United States Attorney's Office of the Northern District of Mississippi, holding a joint press conference today about this Mississippi Delta drug conspiracy takedown, where all sorts of law enforcement work together for this operation. We'll go to learn a little bit more now.
I'd like to thank you all for coming here today. I am especially grateful and honored that we have the Deputy Director of the FBI, Andrew Bailey, is here with us today. We have the Special Agent in charge of the Jackson Field Division, Robert Eichhoff, here as well, and Robert Mims, who apparently doesn't want to be in the frame, but that's fine. He's our AUSA who's actually prosecuting this case. He's the lead prosecutor on the case. And if y'all just bear with us, we have a lot of information to get to you. And at the end of that, we're going to take a few questions, so don't worry. But we're here today to talk about some incredibly serious allegations that mark a it's just a monumental betrayal of public trust, is what we're talking about here today. We're here today to announce the indictment and arrest of 20 individuals, most of them law enforcement officers in the Mississippi Delta region. The indictments generally allege the taking of bribes to attempt to aid and abet drug trafficking, as well as associated crimes. The first indictment that I'll talk about involves a conspiracy whereby law enforcement officers and their accomplices are alleged to have agreed to provide safe passage for illegal narcotics and drug proceeds to the Mississippi Delta region, and ultimately on the last of those runs into Memphis itself. And they did this in return for bribe payments, for money. They are also indicted for related firearms offenses and, of course, individual counts related to specific runs throughout the Mississippi Delta. Indicted in this conspiracy are the following individuals, and when I'm giving you this list of places of employment, a lot of them are still employed, or were up to today, in those places, but the places I'm referring to where they're employed, that's really during the times that are relevant to the charges in their indictment. So indicted in this particular conspiracy were Brandon Addison, who's a Mississippi law enforcement officer employed by the Hollandale Police Department and the Humphreys County Sheriff's Office at times relevant to the indictment. Javari Howard, a Mississippi law enforcement officer employed by the Metcalf Police Department and later, during the course of the investigation, the Hollandale Police Department. Milton Gaston, the elected sheriff of Washington County, Mississippi. Truron Grayson, who was employed by the Humphreys County Sheriff's Office. Bruce Williams, who was the elected, or is at the moment, the elected sheriff of Humphreys County, Mississippi. Sean Williams, who was employed by the Yazoo City Police Department. Dexter Franklin, who was employed by the Washington County Sheriff's Office. Wendell Johnson, who was employed by the Bolivar County Sheriff's Office. Now, I want to take note on this particular name. When you see the indictments themselves, you're going to have 22 names. I'm about to explain why we're telling you 20 people are now charged. And so this next individual who appears in the indictment, I want to make this very clear, based on information obtained today, the charges against Amber Holmes have been dismissed. She's no longer charged in this case and is no longer implicated in any wrongdoing related to this investigation. The remaining co-defendants on that first indictment, the large one, are Marcus Nolan, Asan Roach, Jeremy Salas, Torio Chaz Wiseman, Pierre Lakes, and Derek Wallace. The first four of those individuals I named escorted alleged drugs on runs on a run to Memphis. And likewise, the last two persons I named, Mr. Lakes and Mr. Wallace joined the conspiracy on a trip that was taken by a number of the co-conspirators to Miami, Florida. A separate indictment charges a conspiracy as follows. It's essentially the attempt to aid and abet the transport and distribution of illegal narcotics in return for bribes, related offenses regarding the carrying of firearms while doing that, and that the crux of that indictment was the transport of what the defendants thought were 25 kilograms of cocaine through the Mississippi Delta. And those defendants are Jamario Sanford, who is employed at the Greenwood Police Department, Marvin Flowers, who is employed at the Sunflower County Sheriff's Department. And again, this is the second of those names I mentioned to you. You'll see in an indictment the name Taquana Rucker. And again, based on information obtained today, the charges against Ms. Rucker have been dismissed. She's no longer charged in this case and is no longer implicated in any wrongdoing in this investigation. A further indictment charges Martavius Moore, who's a police officer in Greenville, Mississippi, with aiding and abetting the transport of what he thought was 25 kilograms of cocaine and carrying a firearm, of course, during that. Marquavius Bankhead was a patrolman with the Mississippi Highway Patrol. And he has been indicted, and he's no longer with the Highway Patrol. He has recently resigned from the Highway Patrol. He was indicted for, again, aiding and abetting the transport of 25 kilograms of cocaine, or what he thought was that. Chaka Gaines with the Greenville Police Department was again charged with attempting to aid and abet the transportation of narcotics, essentially to traffic drugs through the Delta, and was likewise charged with a firearm offense related to that. DeQuarian Smith with the Humphreys County Sheriff's Department and the Isola Police Department was likewise charged with conspiracy to aid and abet the possession, transportation, and distribution of illegal narcotics. Finally, and this is always important to say at one of these, I'd remind everybody present that an indictment is just that, it's an allegation. That indictment, those allegations have to be proven in a court of law. Everybody in this country operates under the presumption of innocence, and nothing's changed about that. That being said, there's an 18th century philosopher, writer, you name it, he did a lot, named Edmund Burke, and there's a quote that is often associated with him, and that is that the only thing necessary for evil to flourish is for good men to do nothing. And I am before you today profusely thanking the good men of the FBI, because they'll tell you a little bit more about the investigation itself, but this was a years-long investigation. This wasn't anything that happened overnight. They invested a lot of time, a lot of resources into conducting a very thorough investigation that continues today. And I cannot thank them enough. The work put in by Assistant United States Attorney Robert Mims has been phenomenal. And I just appreciate the fact that good men and good women are standing in that breach to try to restore confidence in our law enforcement agencies in Mississippi. And at this time, I'm very much honored to invite Deputy Director Andrew Bailey to make a few comments. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, FBI Deputy Director Andrew Bailey. I am present here today to support the mission of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and to enhance the cooperation and coordination with our proud partners at the United States Attorney's Office. And I want to emphasize that my presence is to underline the importance and the magnitude of this case. This operation and these indictments are a success, but they point to a troubling reality. We're talking about 14 current or former law enforcement officers, 6 co-conspirators who are alleged to have sold out the public, promoted crimes that they should have been investigating and stopped, and instead of working to stem the flow of dangerous controlled substances, the evidence will show they took bribes to facilitate the distribution of controlled substances. They betrayed the trust that the public placed in them, disgraced the badge, and undermined the hard work of good law enforcement officers across this state and across the region. This corruption permeated all levels. It extended across multiple counties and multiple jurisdictions in the state of Mississippi and beyond. But the Department of Justice and its subcomponent, the FBI, will not allow the wrongdoing and wrongdoers to get away with it. We will stop these kinds of disgraceful and shameful abuses of public office, and will prove that we will not tolerate corruption amongst America's criminal justice system. I want to acknowledge the brave men and women of the FBI Jackson Field Office and the incredible work they did leading this multi-year complex investigation. I want to thank members of the SWAT and HRT teams for their professionalism in apprehending the suspects, these corrupt officers, without incident. I want to thank our state and local partners for supporting this team effort. I want to thank the Criminal Investigation Division's Public Corruption Unit for leading these efforts. I want to thank the United States Attorney, Clay Joyner, for his partnership in this endeavor, and Attorney General Bondi and the entire DOJ for their leadership and guidance in these matters. This administration has worked tirelessly to support the FBI's work across the country, and we are grateful. As to the broader significance, public corruption is a crime against the entire community, against all citizens, and against the rule of law itself. It leads to the loss of trust in law enforcement and erodes the justice system, thereby endangering citizens. Mississippi communities deserve better the American public deserves better. Let this be a lesson for those sworn to serve the public that if you're a good law enforcement officer, the FBI will always stand with you. But for those corrupt individuals who abuse their office, we will come for you and hold you accountable. To all Americans listening, the FBI will never stop protecting from these kinds of abuses of authority. Thank you for being here today, and I'd like to turn it over to the head of the Jackson Field Office, SAC Eichhoff. Thanks, sir.
Robert Eichhoff, Special Agent in Charge, FBI here in Mississippi. FBI Jackson is proud to announce multi-year investigation that exemplifies the FBI's dedication to restoring the public's trust. As alleged in the indictments, this investigation began after FBI Jackson received information on allegations of systemic law enforcement corruption that crossed multiple counties in the Delta of Mississippi. These corrupt law enforcement officers provided protection to those whom they believed were drug traffickers in exchange for bribe payments. Each of the law enforcement officers arrested had taken an oath to protect and serve their respective communities, an oath that they violated. The positions of these arrested officers range from patrol officers up to police chiefs and sheriffs. This type of corruption strikes at the heart of community. It erodes public confidence and undermines the strength of law enforcement integrity. Earlier this month, the FBI responded to the mass killing in Leland, Mississippi. During many interviews, we learned of the community's distrust of select law enforcement officers due to the concerns of corruption. Law enforcement is only effective when the community they protect can trust that law enforcement officers are honestly serving the community's interest. Mississippians deserve and rightfully expect officers to obey their oath. The FBI is committed to working in partnership with the United States Attorney's Office to investigate officers who violate the oath, the law, and the public's trust. We would not be here today if it was not for the dedication of the men and women of the FBI, and in particular the case team that have devoted years focused on bringing trust, renewing trust, restoring trust of law enforcement, specifically within the Delta region. Their commitment is born out of our mission, which is to protect the American people and uphold the Constitution. We do our work with rigor, and we do it with a mindfulness of doing the right thing the right way. They did that. I want to thank the United States Attorney's Office, and specifically noting the Acting United States Attorney Clay Joyner and Robert Mims for the work that they have done over the years, working shoulder to shoulder with us on this investigation. And for the United States Marshal Service for their support in this extraordinary arrest operation today. I want to thank Deputy Director Bailey for his attendance. It goes to show the commitment at all levels of the FBI to ensure that we are holding to account.
All right, folks, we're going to take a 2-minute break. On the other side, we have a professor joining us to talk a little bit more about these SNAP benefits that are going away in just a day. We'll see you in 2 minutes. All right, welcome back. Thank you for joining us. We're going to talk about SNAP funding. I'm sure a lot of you know more than 40 million Americans are going to be impacted by this when SNAP runs out on November 1st. There's been a lot of discussion about this at the congressional level, senators on both sides of the aisle talking today. So let's bring in Professor Sarah Bowen with the College of Humanities and Social Sciences at North Carolina State University. Ms. Bowen, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your time. This is a tumultuous time for so many Americans, especially who depend on this funding. So we'll just start with, what you have seen in terms of SNAP benefits. What are SNAP benefits? Let's just start there, because I think some people think about SNAP benefits. They hear WIC, they hear other food subsidies programs in general. So let's just start there. What SNAP is, and who are the people that are eligible for this year on year?
Okay, so SNAP benefits are a federal program like WIC, but they're separate. And they are benefits that can be used for food, like money, that get deposited on an EBT card every month. So they can be used for most types of food, but they can't be used for alcohol, tobacco, toiletries, household products, just food. And generally, people who make within 130% of the poverty line, which is about $42,000 for a family of four, could be eligible for SNAP, although not everyone who makes that income is eligible. There are work requirements, time limits, and also rules about assets, like what you can own. But basically, it's a way for people who don't make a lot of money, or because they either have a job that doesn't pay very much, or they can't work because their children are disabled or elderly, to get benefits that can be used like money for the food they need.
Awesome. Thank you for that explanation. I do have to ask, just because there's been points made just even today, two different things that folks aren't really sure if there's an eligibility requirement, which there are several, as you kind of pointed out. So if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about that. And then I've been seeing, and people have been questioning certain stations and sources about eligibility for folks who are not Americans receiving food benefits. Would you tell us a little bit more about both those points, if you wouldn't mind, real quickly?
Yeah, so there are quite a few. The eligibility requirements are complicated. People have to meet lots of requirements to be eligible. So you generally need to work or be looking actively for a job if you can work. If you are a little kid or you're over 60, those can be waived, but most other people have to work. And then there's lots of requirements, like you have to recertify every so often. All of that kind of can vary by state, but there are lots of eligibility requirements, and those have gotten stricter this year. And then in terms of the other question, non-citizens are not eligible for SNAP. So that's often kind of part of the rhetoric, that lots of people are coming from outside the country and then they're getting SNAP, but immigrants are generally not eligible for SNAP.
Right, and the same thing was said about these Affordable Care Act subsidies, right? That is at the crux of what the Democrats say is at their discussion with Republicans, right? There's been a lot of people claiming that people that are non-citizens of the United States are getting those subsidies, which is just not true. There's data to back this up. So I appreciate you debunking those things and kind of going through those with us. We want to make sure we give the most accurate information to our viewers. Historically speaking, if these benefits do expire, and they seem to be going that way, I know there's a federal judge who might step in the next 24 hours or so. With that being said, this seems like we're in uncharted waters. Just to set the stage for folks, in the mega bill that was passed just this summer, there was the largest SNAP cut we've seen in all of history. In fact, I think it was $187 billion from the program, and this is through 2034. So it's about 20% they're estimating of the total funding. This seems like, again, we've never done something like this. The biggest cut we've ever seen happened months ago. We are in uncharted territory, right, Ms. Bowen?
Yes. So the government, so first, one good thing about SNAP is that it's an entitlement program, which isn't anything about being entitled. It just means that there's no cap. So generally, when the economy is doing bad, more people can get SNAP, and that kind of happens automatically, which is a good system. So this is an example where we have economic problems. We're cutting SNAP. Food prices keep going up, and now we're just eliminating it for November. And most importantly, we have not done this. We've had other downturns, including 2018. It was the end of 2018, beginning of 2019. That was Trump administration, and they funded SNAP through that because I think there generally is a consensus, and we've heard this from Democrats and Republicans this week, that yes, even if we're having some debates in the government and some problems, that we shouldn't take that out on the people that need this food.
Right. Right. And in fact, as I'm sure you well know, there is contingency funding. It's not as much as they would need per month. I think it's more than $8 billion that it costs to fund this SNAP program, give or take $1 billion there or so. But again, I see people all over Facebook, maybe in even X, kind of talking about potentially things getting a little bit dicey if these SNAP benefits are shut off. And I know you can't necessarily comment on, these theories, but what should folks be prepared for when these SNAP benefits end? I mean, food banks were already seeing lines. They're already being contacted. In fact, I was reading an article today that the USDA had some product, other groceries to give to some of these food banks across the nation. That food went to waste, never got to these food banks. Can you kind of comment on what we could see at grocery stores? There's been a lot of talk about fear, people going to grocery stores and being worried about their stuff being stolen. All sorts of stuff. And I'm not saying this is going to happen, but as we've said, we're in uncharted territory. This is unprecedented, and I'm not sure folks really know what's next, right?
Yeah, so first of all, as you noted, there are contingency funds, and it seems like it's between $5 and $6 billion, and they need $8 billion ish per month. That would get us pretty far. That gives us several more weeks. Some states, but most cannot do this, are also using another form, like they're using their own ways of getting some emergency funding. Yeah. So and there are also things that the USDA could do to keep funding going. Like they appropriated some other money to fund WIC, and they might be able to do something like that for SNAP.
Okay.
So there are things, there's also the possibility of considering a bill that would be SNAP specific, like take out the rest of the debates and just focus on that. So I think there are options. The main one would be the USDA should use the money it has for this purpose to fund SNAP and go forward. In terms of the other question, I wouldn't jump to that conclusion that we're going to see terrible crime happening, but it's going to be bad for everyone. At a super basic level, it's bad for grocery stores because there's all these people that want to spend their money, their SNAP benefits there, and they won't be able to do that. It's very bad for the food banks. This is already a terrible year for them. As food prices go up and food insecurity is going up, they already face more demand. And food banks, it's something like for every one meal that someone gets from a food bank, 9 are coming from SNAP. So their volume and scale is not anywhere near SNAP's. They cannot, in the best of circumstances, they just can't fill that gap. And obviously, most importantly, it's bad for so many people. And parents and caretakers are going to do everything they can to make sure that the children and the other people in their care are not affected, but that's terrible for their health, their mental and physical health. And we also know that kids still do feel the effects, that it can affect school performance and health and all sorts of things. So yeah.
Well, and it can create trauma in and of itself, right? And I don't think folks realize also, right, the people that are on SNAP, some of them, right, they are working. I see a lot of claims from people on social media that people that are on SNAP aren't working. And as we've pointed out numerous times, and if you would just clarify in just a second here, there are work requirements. And in fact, like I said, many of these people are working so much that they can't, that's why they're on SNAP, they can't afford their groceries, right?
Exactly. I don't know the exact percent, but 4 out of 5 SNAP households include either a child, an elderly adult, or someone with a disability. And many of the SNAP recipients, the individual people, it's about 60% are people that cannot work because they're children, they're old, or they're disabled. So then you have about 40% that is working age adults, and most of those people are working. If they can, or in some cases, the reason they're on SNAP, because a lot of people are not on SNAP for years and years and years, they're on SNAP for relatively short periods of time because, for example, they lose their job.
Right.
So, yes, most people who are getting SNAP either can't work because of various circumstances, or they are
On the
working.
other side of that, yeah. You've answered so many great questions, or great answers to the questions that we had. I appreciate that. Anything else that you wanted to point it out, maybe that I didn't ask, or that you wanted to let us, let our viewers know on? I'll kind of open the floor for you.
I mean, I think there's these. I think we need to step away from this idea of like demonizing people because they receive SNAP. Having these debates about like who deserves, who's taking these resources, like those kinds of debates, first of all, they're factually not true, as we've kind of discussed, and they're often used by people to divide us and to kind of distract and justify cutting these kind of programs, as happened earlier this year. So and then the other thing, so that's bad enough. The other thing is they trickle down to the people that are getting SNAP, and they make them feel like they don't deserve this. I feel like SNAP, its origin started in the Great Depression. We had no federal food assistance program then, and people were literally dying of hunger, and it took several iterations, but that's what became food stamps, which was later renamed SNAP. And the idea behind that was that in a country that has as much as we have, that we should make sure that everyone has enough to eat. I think that's still clearly true. SNAP is our best political policy tool for fighting hunger and ensuring that. So.
Yeah, and there seems to be numbers to show that it's one of the most efficient programs that the United States has ever had. So clearly, the evidence is in the details for this. So we will see where this goes. As I said, I'm sure people are watching to see what happens with this federal judge who could step in. I guess the problem there is, Ms. Bowen, is the money wouldn't be there by November 1st. It sounds like it could take a week or so, or maybe even longer, for these funds to get to these individuals, to Americans, if this judge does step in. So again, it doesn't really offer a lot of hope for folks, but that's why we're having the conversation, to try and create awareness around this thing. So thank you so much again for your time tonight, and being the expert on this and debunking some of those things. We certainly appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No problem. All right. We're going to take a 2-minute break, guys. We'll be back right after this. All right, what an awesome interview we just had with Professor Bowen from North Carolina State about SNAP benefits. If you missed it, it will be inside WCNC Plus once we get off of this show. Well, we do want to go to Vice President J.D. Vance talking a little bit more about the government shutdown as it pertains to America's airports. We'll go to this now.
How we doing? Good, good. Well, let's let these guys file out here, but what we just did was a little roundtable with leaders in the aviation industry. We've got leaders of labor represented. We've got leaders of the businesses that are, of course, making the airline industry run. And I just wanted to hear from people about the stresses of the aviation industry in light of the fact of the shutdown. And here's what I found out. It actually worries me a great deal because I think that as much as delays have gotten worse over the last couple of weeks, everybody here is very worried that we're going to see more delays, more stresses on the people who are actually making the aviation system run, and more problems for both the consumers but also the great workers who actually make this incredible shining jewel of the American economy actually work and work on time and work safely. Here are the things that I worry about. I worry about the people who are scanning our bags and making us get through the security line. I worry they're not getting paychecks. They're starting to get worried about how to feed their families and how to pay school tuition and everything else. I worry about the pilots who haven't gotten paid in a long time. I worry about the air traffic controllers who, of course, make this entire system extra safe. I worry about them, more worried about their credit card bill than they should be because they're not getting a paycheck because Democrats refuse to open the government. Now, I understand that a lot of Americans are sick of partisanship in Washington, D.C. Trust me, I've been here for 9 months in this job. I am sick of partisanship in Washington, D.C. But this is very, very simple. Every partisan dispute, every policy disagreement, all of these things we can talk about, we can reason through, we can disagree, we can shake hands and compromise on some of those issues, hopefully, but this is something that every single American, Democrat or Republican or Independent, should be able to agree on. Open the government. Stop this craziness and open the government. It's causing way too many problems, and some of the folks behind me are the people who are dealing with the problems. Now let's just recap exactly what's happened politically in this town related to the government shutdown. We have had now multiple votes to reopen the United States government. The House of Representatives has voted affirmatively to reopen the United States government. 52 Republicans and 3 Democrats consistently vote to reopen the United States government, but we need 60 votes. So all we need to end the craziness, to pay the air traffic controllers, to pay the TSA agents, to pay the pilots, to make sure that food stamp benefits continue to go out to the American people who need them, all we need is 5 reasonable Democrats to join 3 moderate Democrats and 52 Republicans to reopen the government. I want to let Sean Duffy say something, but before I do, I just want to say to any Democrat in the United States Senate, we are happy to talk about any policy issue. We're happy to talk about health care policy. We're happy to talk about tax policy. We're happy to talk about regulatory policy, but not at the point of a gun. You do not get to take the American people's government hostage and then demand that we give you everything you want in order to pay our air traffic controllers. It's a ridiculous set of demands. Let's reopen the government, and then let's sit down and talk about how to compromise on policy for the American people. Sean?
Appreciate it, Mr. Vice President. So, first, I want to thank you for calling this meeting of the aviation industry. We have a great coalition, bipartisan coalition, and so thank you for that. I just want to tell you, we look at the aviation system, and we've seen blips and blurbs, whether it's LAX or it's Atlanta or it's Dallas. You're seeing impacts of this shutdown on our airspace, and that means travelers are delayed, travelers are canceled. It has real problems. So our air traffic controllers, their first paycheck they missed, well, they got 90%, 80% of the paycheck. That was in early October. They just missed their full paycheck. And you got to think, well, then the second paycheck comes. That's not when we have real disruption. Because every single day, as all of you people know, as we all pay our bills, but it's not just the mortgage and the car payment, which is very real, but they're buying food. They travel 30, 45 minutes into the towers or the centers, so you have to buy gas. They have kids that want to play football or volleyball or tennis, and they can't afford the very life expenses that they need those paychecks for. And so though we've maintained the safety, I'm grateful for our controllers who are coming in every day. But I do think as this shutdown continues, you're going to see more pressure on controllers, more pressure on TSA workers, and that's going to have real impact. One group that we don't talk about a lot is we have technicians that work in our centers I've talked to you all about how old our equipment is. We have technicians that come in every single day to make sure this equipment actually works. They too aren't getting paid, and this is burning, and it's having a real impact on our men and women who serve our airspace. And so I would join the Vice President and say, don't hold us hostage. Don't hold American families' travel hostage. Don't hold air traffic controllers hostage. Open up the government, have a conversation, let's get it resolved. But again, every day it gets harder. Every day there's going to be more challenges. And the last point I'll make before I turn it over to Sean O'Brien's really great hair day today is the fact that a lot of our people can go through the miss of one paycheck, and it's hard for them, but a lot of them can get through it. None of them can get through 2 paychecks. And so, again, if Democrats don't get their act together very quickly, you're going to see huge problems. And again, I would come to them with a clean heart and say, open up the government, and then let's have a conversation. I'll give it to the Teamster, Sean O'Brien.
Thank you very much, Secretary Duffy. Thank you, Vice President Vance. Look, the bottom line, and we took a position, I represent 1.3 million working men and women in this country for the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. We took a position 3 weeks ago. Pass a clean CR, get to the table, negotiate a deal. Do not put working people in the middle of a problem they should not be in there. And we got to think about the families that are going to be affected. Think about when you have to tell your son or daughter they can't play sports because you're not getting paid. Think about when you can't pay your mortgage. Think about when you can't pay your tuition. Put the politics aside, get to the table, negotiate a deal, pass a clean CR right now, and then figure out the problems moving forward. And I want to thank the air traffic controllers. I want to thank the Aviation Administration for all their hard work and sacrifice they make. And look, security and safety of the airlines is paramount. Let's not compromise the safety and security. Pass a clean CR. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Anybody else? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you, Secretary Duffy. Thank you all for being here with us today. And I want to start by really thanking the professionals, the air traffic controllers, folks at the TSA, also the FAA, the people in management. They're working hard. They are keeping the skies safe. They've minimized delays. Fewer than 2% of flights have been delayed so far because of air traffic control shortage. So they've done a great job. But it's putting stress on people. It's not fair to those people. It's also putting stress on the economy. You know, the first couple of weeks has had no impact on the economy. But as every day goes by, the impacts start to grow. And airlines are a pretty good real-time indicator of the economy. And we start to see, still minor, but steep booking impact. And you see that happening in the economy. We put the whole economy at risk. And so it's been 30 days. And while I don't have a position on which partisan side and how things should be settled with healthcare, it has been 30 days. I also think it is time to pass a clean CR. Use that as the opportunity to get into a room behind closed doors and negotiate hard on the real and substantive issues that the American people want our politicians on both sides of the aisle to solve. But let's get a clean CR and get that negotiation done behind closed doors without the pressure, without putting the American workers and the American economy at risk.
You're great.
Mr. Vice
Okay, guys, we'll
President.
take a few questions. Yeah.
Mr. Vice President. Thanks, Mr. Vice President. Mary Margaret with Daily Wire. We're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of this really tragic plane crash in D.C. Should Americans be afraid to fly while the shutdown continues?
No, I don't think Americans should be afraid to fly because we've got great airline professionals who are keeping the safest aviation industry in the world afloat, but they're doing it with incredible stress. What I worry more about is that if you have, let's say, a pilot who's now missed 2 paychecks, who's now telling his kids that they can't do things that they'd like to do, who's now worried about feeding his family, maybe that guy doesn't show up to work, maybe he goes and gets a different job. That means greater delays for the American people. I worry about the air traffic controller who now has missed 2 paychecks, who's got to pay his credit card bill or his mortgage, but can't pay both, and decides, you know what, this industry is not for me. The Secretary of Transportation made a great point in private. I'm going to steal it right now because we got to get people into the air traffic control industry. We had a shortage of 2,000 people. How many of those people look to the future, see the congressional Democrats can't get their act together and say, you know what, we're not going to join air traffic controlling at all, which is going to further extend the delays. I think that we have a safe system because these guys are doing heroic things in the midst of this terrible shutdown. But why do we ask them to do so much without getting paid? Why don't we pay them so that they can be happy, they can do the best job they can do, and they're not worried about feeding their families while they're doing a very important job for all of us.
Mr. Vice President.
Yeah.
Could you let us know your understanding of the President's comments that he wants to resume nuclear testing after more than the warheads themselves, the distribution, the missiles, and so forth? What's your understanding of these attacks?
Well, look, I'll answer that very briefly, but I really do want to focus on the shutdown that is affecting the American people. I think the president's truth speaks for itself. We have a big arsenal, obviously. The Russians have a large nuclear arsenal. The Chinese have a large nuclear arsenal. Sometimes you've got to test it to make sure that it's functioning and working properly. We've been working very closely, even with nations that we don't have the best relations with, to try to limit nuclear proliferation. The president's going to keep on working on that, but it's an important part of American national security to make sure that this nuclear arsenal we have actually functions properly, and that's part of a testing regime. To be clear, we know that it does work properly, but you got to keep on top of it over time, and the president just wants to make sure that we do that.
Mr. Vice President, Kelly Meyer with News Nation, and my dad is a pilot, so thank you for what you're doing to keep this guy safe. I wanted to ask you, I know you said that you're going to talk with folks on Capitol Hill after they open the government back up. If this keeps going on, would you consider getting everyone together like you did before the shutdown here at the White House to talk? And just quickly on nuclear, does the new testing make the world less safe?
So I'm not going to answer. I've answered all the questions about nuclear testing that I'm going to answer. I want to talk about the government shutdown here, and I'd like to focus the questions there. But to your point, look, I've never said we're not going to talk to congressional Democrats until they reopen the government. What I've said is we are not going to give in on policy demands under the threat of hostage taking. I mean, if any moderate Democrat or any Democrat period from the United States Senate wants to come over, they're welcome to walk into these doors in an hour. I'm happy to talk to them about how to end the government shutdown, but it's actually very simple because there's a clean CR, as you heard from everybody, that would reopen the government. What we're also saying is that we're not going to allow anybody, Democrat or Republican, to effectively threaten any policy demand and to place that upon reopening the government. You don't reward hostage taking. If Democrats want to talk about healthcare policy, let's talk about healthcare policy. If they want to talk about tax policy, let's talk about tax policy. They don't get to come in here and say, you give us everything we want, or we're going to shut down the government and not pay our pilots and not pay our air traffic controllers. It's ridiculous, disgraceful, irresponsible behavior. There have got to be 5 more moderate Democrats in this entire city who are willing to work with us to reopen the government.
Mr. Vice President, on the issue of the shutdown, there is the concern about 42 million people losing their SNAP benefits.
Of course.
Over this weekend. The administration's moved a lot of money around to pay troops, to pay federal law enforcement, and is telling Congress they can't move money around to pay at least some of those benefits. Why not? And would there be some push perhaps in the next 48 hours to try to do that so Americans don't go hungry?
Well, here's the problem. If you go back to previous government shutdowns, what has happened is that sometimes the president has tried to make the shutdown as painful as possible on the American people. I give the president of the United States great credit and the entire team for trying to make this as painless as possible. The Democrats are acting irresponsibly. He doesn't want the American people to suffer because of it. But look, right now, this government, this administration, we're like guys running around, with a leak in a damn wall, trying to plug it with bubble gum. And we plug one spot with bubble gum, and we plug another spot with bubble gum, and we plug another spot with bubble gum. Why don't the Democrats just stop this entire charade and reopen the government so that we don't have to try to make this thing work on a shoestring budget, which is what we're trying to do. The unfortunate reality, and we're starting to see this with our aviation industry, we're going to find out the hard way with SNAP benefits. The American people are already suffering, and the suffering is going to get a lot worse. Not because the President of the United States has failed to make the shutdown painless. He's tried to do everything that he can to make it as unpainless as possible. The reason that pain is coming and the reason it's building is because we're not passing the clean bill to reopen the government. It's a very easy thing to do.
So you're not...
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I'm Monica Page with Frontlines Turning Point USA. On the government shutdown, of course, we're approaching Thanksgiving, we're approaching the holidays. What could travel look like, if the Democrats don't open the government in time?
So I'm going to let our great Secretary of Transportation answer this question. Look, it could be a disaster. It really could be. Because at that point, you're talking about people who have missed 3 paychecks. They've missed 4 paychecks. How many of them are not going to show up for work? You take the TSA lines that are already too long, even right now, and say half of those people don't show up for work. Not because they're not hard workers or good people, but because they've got to find a different job to feed their families. What happens when the security lines are not an hour long, but they're 4 hours long? What happens when pilots start not showing up for work because they're so focused on paying the bills they can't fly the plane safely? That's going to lead to massive delays. We want people to be able to get home for Thanksgiving. We want people to be able to travel for business, to make this entire engine of commerce work. We want the aviation industry to work. It's not going to work unless the Democrats reopen the government. These guys are doing heroic things to make it work as well as it possibly can, but every single person that I talk to a word, they are worried that the delays are going to reach a point where it makes it very, very hard for the American people to fly.
So to answer your question, our traffic will be snarling, right? It'll be a disaster in aviation. And just I'm going to steal, you stole my point, I'll steal one from Scott Kirby from United. October is a slower air travel month, and we have great weather in October. And so you've seen minimal disruption because of good weather and slower travel. But as we go into November, travel picks up as people start to look at going to see their families, kids come home from college. And if you don't have air traffic controllers who are being paid, they may want to stay in the job, but they cannot. They're going to have to go take a second job, and you're going to have mass issues throughout the airspace. People will not be able to go from one place to the other because of the government shutdown. And I hope Democrats don't take it to that point.
Mr. Vice President. Yeah. Alex Boucher from ABC News. I'm curious, as we move into this holiday travel season, is the administration working on a plan to keep airports running smoothly? The other thing that I wanted to ask you is we got 20 million Americans who are set to see their health care premiums skyrocket with those ACA tax credits expiring. I'm curious your response there. Is the administration working on a plan to expand them?
Why don't you take the question about what we're trying to do to try to limit the effects of the shutdown on aviation? I think Sean is a great person to address that, and then I'll address the health insurance premium question.
Yeah, so we're working closely with NATCA, our air traffic controllers union, our technicians who work to keep the equipment safe and operational. I know Christy's working with TSA, so we are doing all we can to partner with and talk to our government employees who make this system run smoothly. But we can only ask so much. And I, as a guy who had a lot of kids and didn't make a lot of money early in my life, I know the pressure that these families are under. And by the way, think when these families go home, the fights that are had over the fact that you don't have money for basketball this season. The family strife that happens because they don't have money coming in the door is very, very real. So we are doing all we can to work with our partners to keep things running smoothly. But in the end, we can only go so far. And if I could just, before I turn it over, I love that you guys are asking us questions about what we can do to make this less painful. There's an easy, painless solution. Pass the clean CR. And by the way, I think you all, I was part of some shutdowns myself in Congress, and the tone of the press corps is very, very different in this one. You were rabid against Republicans who voted not to open the government up, and it seems like everyone is so docile. And so, what is the president going to do to alleviate the pain? I'm out of them all. Anyone can go see the World War II Museum. They can all go see the Vietnam Memorial. Again, we didn't close those down. This administration is doing everything they can to alleviate the pain on the American people. Go back to Barack Obama. He did everything he could to shut down parks and memorials across this city. And so, again, it's an easy answer. Go ask the Democrats that question. Say, what are you going to do to make sure that people get SNAP benefits this Saturday? Or they have health care assistance for their Obamacare? What are you going to do? Because we're doing everything we can on our end, but there's not much more we can do because of the rules of the road by which we have to play. And so, again, I'm grateful for this team because they care about the American people. I just wonder, do the Democrats care the way we do? And if they do, open it up, sit down, and negotiate.
Here. That's a great point. I want to ask the question about health insurance premiums because, look, we don't want the American people's health insurance premiums to go up. We're very worried about this. The president's been talking about this since before we even took office, that we're inheriting a healthcare system that has suffered some real problems under the Biden administration. Because of that, you're seeing health insurance premiums skyrocket. Now, here is our very simple proposal to the Democrats. Let's sit down and come to a compromise and work it out. And you know what the Democrats' response to that is? Give us everything we want or we're going to shut down the government and keep it shut down. That is not reasonable behavior. That's not how you do compromise in this town. That is the way that the Democrats have operated. They are trying to take a hostage, and we can't reward that behavior. If we do that, If we say yes, of course, we'll give you everything that you want if you reopen the government, you know what's going to happen? In 3 months, they're going to come back to the administration and they're again going to say, we're going to shut down the aviation industry. We're going to deny people SNAP benefits unless you give us exactly what you want. That's how a child behaves. That is not how a responsible governing party behaves in the United States of America. And let me make one final point, and then we'll cut out of this press conference. Look, I've been a little bit unfair, and I want to correct this, because when I say the Democrats have shut down the government, it's actually the far left side of the Democratic Party, because to their great credit, 3 moderate Democrats joined 52 Senate Republicans to vote to reopen the government. We need 5 more reasonable Democrats to put the American people first and reopen the government. That's all that we're asking. Let's talk about health care policy. Let's make sure that we ensure that Americans' health insurance premiums don't go up. We want that, and we're willing to work with people for it, but they've got to reopen the government first. Sean came from a background not that dissimilar from mine. Sean O'Brien came from a background not that dissimilar from mine. There are moms and dads who are fighting right now because they're worried about not being able to pay the credit card bill and the mortgage bill. There are parents who have to look their kids in the eye and say, you know what, we're not going to do football this year. We're not going to do basketball this year because I can't pay for it because the federal government is shut down and I'm not getting a paycheck. Do we want those people who keep the aviation system running to not be able to feed their families, to not be able to pay for some of the things that make life worth living? The answer to that question is absolutely. We want them to be able to afford a good life. The only way for that to happen is to reopen the government. It'll be good for those who fly. It'll be good for those who work in the aviation industry. It'll be good for the whole country. Just do the common sense thing, Democrats. Reopen the government. We need 5 Senate Democrats to join us. I hope that they will. Thank you, guys.
All right, folks, we're going to take a 2-minute break and hear the Democratic side of this. Representative Hakeem Jeffries will speak in 2 minutes. All right, folks, welcome back. As we promised, we're going to listen to Leader Hakeem Jeffries talk a little bit more about the Democratic side and their position on the government shutdown.
Everyone, this is day 30 of the Trump Republican shutdown, and House Republicans remain on vacation. They've canceled votes for 5 consecutive weeks. House Republicans are missing in action. Yet, Speaker Mike Johnson is saying the quiet part out loud. It's extraordinary that earlier today, Mike Johnson admitted that Republicans are willing to starve hungry children in this country and take away SNAP benefits starting on November 1st so they can pressure Democrats into gutting the health care of the American people. That's what Mike Johnson admitted to just a little while ago. That's extraordinary. But it's what we know to be the case. For Republicans, from the very beginning of this presidency, cruelty has been the point. And what has been driving their policy agenda is to make life better for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. That's what the one big ugly bill was all about. Largest cut to Medicaid in American history, ripping food away from the mouths of children, seniors, veterans, and families, and all of this was done to provide massive tax breaks to their billionaire donors. And now as we approach November 1st, just 2 days from now, the beginning of open enrollment, tens of millions of Americans, including many in the state of Louisiana, are about to experience dramatically increased premiums, co-pays, and deductibles that will bankrupt them because of Republican refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. Democrats will continue to stand up for everyday Americans, for working class Americans, and for middle class Americans, for the poor, the sick, and the afflicted, for the least, the lost, and the left behind throughout this country. We're in this fight until we win this fight because we know we're on the right side of this fight for the American people, to protect their health care and to stop these cruel Republicans from ripping SNAP benefits away from the American people. Questions?
Mr. Leader, good afternoon. Thank you. Republicans seem convinced that Democrats are on the verge of caving. We're not going to turn around Wednesday or Thursday morning next week and there's going to be a big turnaround.
Republicans have been delusional from the very beginning of this government shutdown situation that they visited on the American people. Beginning in early September, Democrats have made clear, we will sit down with Republicans to find a bipartisan path forward to pass a spending agreement that makes life better for the American people. But we were never going to vote for a partisan Republican spending bill that guts the health care of the American people in the face of this extraordinary health care crisis that is impacting everyday Americans. Earlier today, several of us in the House Democratic Caucus met with people from West Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina who are on the brink of having their health care ripped away from them. These are hardworking people, hardworking taxpayers, many from rural America and parts of the South, who are here on Capitol Hill. Republicans refused to meet with them, but we sat and spent hours with them earlier today, hearing their stories, and they were encouraging us to stay in this fight on their behalf, to cancel the cuts, to lower the costs, and to save health care.
Nothing's going to change. You're not going to back down.
Our position is the same position that we've had in September, the position that we've held throughout the 30-day Trump Republican shutdown in October, and it's going to be the same position that we have in November.
Yesterday you said that the whip team would meet to discuss congressional pay among the caucus. I think you said a week or so ago that the caucus also was going to discuss the topic. Where have you guys come down on this? I think tomorrow is the day that the checks go out, right?
Checks go out. Checks would ordinarily go out for members of Congress on November 1st. And it's an individual decision that everyone is going to have to make in terms of their own circumstances. And, you know, individual members will make those decisions and then communicate with their constituents, as I plan to do when I'm back home in Brooklyn.
So you'll make that decision on November 1st. You'll make it clear what you're doing?
On or before November 1st, I'll make it clear to my constituents back home in Brooklyn what I plan to do. Thanks.
So the Trump administration, they announced some deliverables from his meeting with President Xi, including, a resumption of large purchases of USD soybeans from China, crackdown on fentanyl shipments from China. The Trump administration said that they would reduce some tariffs in exchange. You've been critical of the president being in Asia during the final days of the month leading up to the SNAP cliff and the ACA open enrollment. Have you had a chance to look at the agreement, and do you think that the deliverables that the Trump administration said that they were able to get from China justify or was worth the president being out of the country in these final days of, SNAP benefits about to expire, the ACA open enrollment starting without a resolution? How are you squaring those deliverables, that agreement, with the fact that the president was gone for these critical days?
It appears to most reasonable observers that Donald Trump was punked on the world stage by the Chinese Communist Party. The notion that Donald Trump has created all of this trouble for the American people, which he has, the Trump tariffs are raising costs on everyday Americans by thousands of dollars per year. And earlier today, I also met with some small business owners and entrepreneurs who made clear to me in very real terms that the Trump tariffs are going to force many of them to shutter their businesses and abandon their dreams. Donald Trump created this massive inferno that's spreading all across the country and now wants to pretend as if he's a firefighter by putting out the damage that he has created and returning to what? A status quo when you've already increased the expensiveness of life on so many working class Americans and are forcing in real time farmers and small business owners and entrepreneurs to close their businesses. It was all a show as far as we can tell. And the only thing that will change my opinion on that is if everyday Americans start to actually see a change in their quality of life, which no one has experienced in a positive direction since the beginning of the Trump presidency. This is a president who repeatedly promised on the campaign trail that costs would go down. Costs haven't gone down. Costs continue to go up. Child care costs up. Housing costs up. Electricity bills through the roof. Grocery costs up. Price of coffee out of control. And most importantly, in this moment, healthcare premiums about to dramatically skyrocket because of the Republicans' continued refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. Republican policies are doing violence to the American people. That's the message that we heard from clergy members who were here on Capitol Hill from all across the country, particularly in the Deep South, earlier today. Policy violence coming from Republicans attacking the health care and the nutritional benefits of the American people. Thanks.
I wonder if we could get your reaction to the apparent redistricting deal that was struck in Ohio. Does this help your efforts to retake the House?
I haven't had a chance to review it.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. As of today, both Delta and United Airlines have called for Congress to pass a clean CR. Is it now incumbent on Democrats to pass this CR and get these air traffic controllers paid who are experiencing delays and airport closures, and that's impacting other Americans as well?
Is it your suggestion that the partisan Republican spending bill that has now been voted down by the Senate 13 different times that guts the health care of the American people is a so-called clean continuing resolution?
It is already a bipartisan CR, as it has some Democrats and independent that's voting for it, and it is an extension of those Biden funding levels, and we're just seeing these impacts and build up.
There's been bipartisan opposition to the partisan Republican spending bill in both the House and in the Senate, and that bipartisan opposition in the Senate has continued 13 different times. Republicans hold press conferences every day, and you know what they do? They lie to the American people. These people are stone cold extremist liars, starting from the very top. And they haven't spoken a word of truth to the American people other than what Mike Johnson admitted today, which is that they want to rip away SNAP benefits from 42 million Americans so they can pressure Democrats to continue Republican policies that would gut the health care of the American people. No thanks. We're not going to do it. And so I appreciate people from throughout corporate America urging the Congress to pass a bipartisan spending agreement. Over the last 30 days, we've said the same thing over and over and over again. We'll sit down with Republicans anytime, any place, anywhere, in order to reopen the government and act a spending agreement that actually meets the needs of the American people. That's been our criteria from the very beginning. A spending agreement that is bipartisan and that makes life better for everyday Americans in terms of their health, public safety, and their economic well-being, which means driving down the high cost of living in the United States of America, which Donald Trump and Republicans have made worse. Life is more expensive, and the overwhelming majority of everyday Americans know that the country is moving in the wrong direction. That's also why we're going to see the American people reject extremist Republicans and their policies on Election Day next Tuesday. I'm sorry. First row, yeah. I'll get to you next.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. First, have you seen any data on how the suspension of food assistance programs may affect different parts of the country? And if so, is that at all affecting your decision, your political calculus here?
There is no political calculus for us. We are fighting this battle not for partisan reasons, but because we're trying to lift up the quality of life of the American people. And the American people understand that there's a Republican health care crisis. The American people understand that Republicans have ripped away Medicaid from 14 million people. The American people understand that Republicans enacted the largest cut to nutritional assistance in American history when they cut $186 billion from their one big ugly bill. And now Republicans have the nerve to admit before the American people that ripping away SNAP benefits from 16 million children in this country and more than 1 million veterans is a pressure tactic designed to get the Congress to continue to gut the health care of the American people. It's very interesting to me that amongst the top 5 states that will suffer from the Republican decision not to spend the emergency funds that Congress already allocated, because the Trump administration has the money to ensure that not a single person in America goes hungry. Congress already allocated that money. They're making an affirmative decision to rip SNAP benefits away from the American people as a pressure tactic. That's what Mike Johnson said earlier today, and we reject that. And Republicans are hurting their own people. Louisiana is a top 5 state that will be hurt as it relates to causing people throughout this country to go hungry.
Your former colleague in the New York State Senate, I believe, Claudia Tenney, said earlier today that the strategy that you and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer are implementing is part of an old Albany playbook or a corrupt Albany playbook. Do you just have any reaction to the claims of that strategy?
Over the last 6 to 8 weeks, the Democratic position has been the same. Cancel the cuts, lower the cost, save health care. Drive down the high cost of living, fix our broken health care system, and clean up corruption. And Republicans, they trot out a new conspiracy theorist each and every day. And now they've dusted one off from the state of New York. We haven't heard from her literally in years. And, I mean, it's all falling on deaf ears because while they change their message every week, the only thing consistent is that they lie. As Democrats, we remain consistent in our policy position. Let's reopen the government. Let's enact a bipartisan spending agreement. Let's lower the high cost of living. Let's address decisively the health care crisis that Republicans are malignantly visiting on the American people.
Leader Thune yesterday indicated there's been an uptick in bipartisan rank-and-file negotiations for ending the shutdown. Are you getting briefed or read in on those talks? What are you hearing from your Senate colleagues?
It's not clear to me that John Thune is being accurate when he reports that there's an uptick in bipartisan communication. What communications is he talking about? I think there's informal conversation taking place among some senators on the Republican side who apparently recognize the need to address the affordable health care crisis that Republicans have created, in the same way that Marjorie Taylor Greene has been very clear on the House side that there is a health care crisis, that we need to address the affordability issue, that we should extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, and that we actually need some leadership coming from Republicans in the House who've been missing in action and on vacation for 5 consecutive weeks. They're going to get paid. Some of them have been camping and then publicly bragging about it. Others apparently have been in Russia. And yet, hardworking federal employees are being asked to work without pay or being furloughed and don't know how they're going to put food on the table. And the best we can get from John Thune is that he believes there's been an uptick in conversations. These people have been missing in action over the last 30 days. It's so irresponsible that Republicans continue to insist that Democrats participate in their toxic effort to gut the health care of the American people. We're not going to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. President Trump posted on True Social late last night that he wants to resume nuclear testing and is reportedly told the Pentagon to immediately resume U.S. nuclear weapons testing. I was wondering if I can get your reaction to that and what that means for some of our adversaries like Russia and China.
Yeah, it appears that the resumption of nuclear testing would be a massive breach of international treaties that have been in place for decades. And it's just another example of Donald Trump and Republican policies going too far, being divorced from reality, and that Donald Trump and Republicans are not focused on the main thing that the American people want us in the Congress to address, which is why, as Democrats, we're going to continue to relentlessly focus on driving down the high cost of living in this country and fixing the health care system that Republicans have broken.
Yesterday and today, Senate Democrats, particularly Senator Warner, have been upset about the GOP only Senate briefing about the strikes in the Caribbean. You, as a member of the Gang of Eight, have you had any briefing or had any talks with intel officials about it?
No intel talk has taken place, even amongst the Gang of Eight, and certainly no information has been presented from the Trump administration or the intel community that provides any basis for the strikes that we've seen, anchored in the law or the Constitution, off the coast of South America.
Do you believe there needs to be a briefing of the Gang of Eight?
Yes.
I wanted to ask, when was the last time you did speak to Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton? And considering the recent police report that indicated she had dementia and needed a caretaker with power of attorney, do you think she should run for re-election?
Yeah, I'm unaware.
All right, folks, we're going to wrap this press conference, take a 2-minute break. We'll see you right after this. We'll have Senator Mark Warner discussing some of the attacks that have happened in the Caribbean and Pacific Ocean against alleged drug smugglers. We'll see you in 2. Welcome back. Again, there's been a number of attacks through September and October in the Pacific and Caribbean oceans. The Trump administration has said that these individuals who are driving these boats that they have attacked apparently are alleged drug traffickers and are smuggling drugs, but there's been no actual evidence to come from the administration to prove some of these points. And in fact, the Democrats, specifically Senator Mark Warner, talking about today that they have not been briefed about some of what's been going on in these operations. So let's go to him now to listen more and learn more from him.
Well, thank you all for being here. And let me just start by saying, in an administration and a world where it feels like every day a new boundary is broken, a new law is overridden, and a classic procedure is ignored. But I think we hit a new low. And let me be blunt. What the administration did in the last 24 hours is corrosive not only to our democracy, but downright dangerous for our national security. Yesterday, the administration convened a briefing for Republican senators, and only Republican senators, on the recent U.S. military strikes in the Caribbean. Along with that briefing, they shared the Office of Legal Counsel's opinion that tries to lay out legal justification for those strikes. Again, they didn't share it with Congress. They didn't share it with the Gang of Eight, which is their responsibility. They didn't share it with the Senate. They shared it with one political party. That is not how the system is supposed to work. That is not how national security decisions are supposed to be made. Matter of fact, just last week, in a very classified, secure meeting with National Security Advisor and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he looked me in the eye and personally promised that we would have that Office of Legal Ethics position laid out. He said he hoped it had been delivered that day. Now, I'm not blaming Secretary Rubio because I know he left for the Middle East the next morning. But instead of honoring that promise, this administration chose to give this sensitive legal document to a select group of more than a dozen Republican senators. Not all on intel, not all, I think, even on armed services, on a purely partisan basis. Now, only when they got caught, only when word got out and senators started asking questions, did they scramble to try and make things work. They said, okay, we'll give it just to Democratic members of the Gang of Eight. This is not how the law works. This is not how Congress is supposed to act. Try to cover your tracks after this malfeasance still falls short of what the Constitution demands. And I'd say in any normal administration, somebody would be fired for this kind of abuse. So now, this Office of Legal Counsel opinion should be shared with every member of the Senate, not just the Gang of Eight. Every senator, Democrat, Republican, Independent, has a constitutional role to play when the United States uses military force. And to make that review, it's not optional. It's our freaking duty. When an administration decides it can pick and choose which elected representatives get the understanding of their legal argument of why this is needed for military force, and only chooses a particular party, it ignores all the checks and balances. We've seen this in other actors. The one area that I thought we could maintain some level of comity, C-O-M-I-T-Y, was around national security, but not from this crowd. You know, this is not about procedure or process or even precedent. When you politicize decision-making about putting our service members in harm's way, you make them less safe. When it becomes a question of whether America's going to go to war and use military forces, becomes simply a tool for partisan back and forth, you not only weaken the bond with our troops, but you completely continue to weaken the credibility with our allies, which has been weakened so many times. You even got countries like the Dutch acknowledging they're not sharing information with us as much as they used to in a public forum because they don't feel they can trust the Americans now. When you deny Congress the access to legal rationale for military action, you also do huge erosion of trust from our public. And again, as I've mentioned, you do real harm to the people who serve. The truth is, our troops, particularly when they're going into an area that's such a gray zone at best, and you've seen officers already appear to be fired because they've raised concerns, they deserve to know with clarity the legal reasoning of why they're being put in harm's way. And again, Congress has an oversight role here. This is U.S. Government 101. And frankly, not to be divided and used as political pawns. And the truth is as well, my Republican colleagues bear responsibility as well. You know, every senator, regardless of party, should have a say on how military force is used. And frankly, Congress has a right and obligation to understand the legal basis. You know, my proudest tenure has been on the Intelligence Committee, and I am proud of its record. I've served under Democrats, Republicans. I've been chair of the committee. I can tell you, Saxby Chambliss, Dianne Feinstein, Richard Burr would have never allowed this to happen. So the question I got from my Republican senators, if you're sitting in this room getting clearly what had been prior Gang of 8 level classified information, didn't somebody raise their hand and say, well, holy crap, where are the Democrats? Who was willing to say, you know, isn't there a constitutional obligation here? You know, it is about separation of powers. For the folks who wave their Constitution around, read the damn thing. And then explain why you would sit through that briefing and not call foul. So I call on this administration to immediately provide not only the OLC opinion, but as well as the secret target list that was briefed, my understanding, yesterday as well. And this ought to go to every senator, not Gang of 8, not just the Intelligence Committee members, now that they have already broken the seal. Everybody needs to be read in. That is what Americans deserve. That's what every senator deserves. Not this cherry picking for political purposes. The country deserves better. And we'll see if anyone is willing to stand up and push back. Take your questions.
Senator, two questions. It's obvious why a target list is classified. Why is the legal rationale?
I don't have any freaking idea. If you've got a valid legal opinion, wouldn't you want to share it with every member? If you believe, I think the administration does, that we know these guys are bad guys, wouldn't you want to catch them and show the world the drugs and show their history of bad activities? The idea that they were afraid, I guess, of a War Powers Act, and they're going to cherry pick Republican senators and share it only with them? Come on, we've been doing this stuff for a while. It's never worked this way. And if we allow this kind of foul to take place, what happens next time? We've already seen, just one last comment on this. I guess I shouldn't be shocked. Only Republicans were called before the strike on Iran. So we are starting a pattern now that says national security, which has always been the province of bipartisanship. It has been the province where, particularly in the Senate, we keep our secrets classified. They are blowing that all up.
And just a quick follow-up. You said you met last week with Secretary Rubio. Do you believe that classified briefing had less information than the briefing that the Republicans got yesterday?
I presume it did. The most secret of briefings, because it has supposedly this target list. Now, and again, let me be clear. I've worked well with Marco over many, many years. I was proud to support him for Secretary of State. He looked me in the eye and promised me this. I hope that he assumed that promise would be carried out before he left the country. And I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt until proven otherwise. But if some lackey in the White House said, no, we can't share that. We can't open ourselves up to actual congressional oversight. In any administration, including Trump 1, that person would be fired.
On military strikes themselves, I'm wondering if there's anything that the Trump administration could tell you, if and when they do tell you, and other Democratic senators, that would lend your support to what's been going on, what we've seen been going on with these strikes in international waters.
Well, first of all, we've got to make clear that we're frankly not putting our service members in harm's way. That means you got to see the underlying legal opinion. And let me acknowledge, Maduro is a bad guy. The drug gangs are awful. But if we have all of the evidence that I think the administration is representing, they ought to share that. Now, you got to protect sources and methods. I get that. But the idea that they're going to kind of arbitrarily pick a dozen Republican senators to share this with and throw this into a partisan scrum? Where in the hell are my Republican colleagues who are willing to stand up and say, no, this is wrong?
Yes, sir. According to the U.S. Justice, these cartels that operate in the Caribbean Sea have a relation with the Maduro regime. So do you think it's important to end the Maduro regime, and what do you think is the best way to do that?
I would simply say this, two things. I wish the American government, frankly under President Biden, would have pushed much stronger when the Venezuelan people, in an enormously courageous move, voted in overwhelming numbers, close to 65%, to throw Maduro out. And I think we missed an opportunity there. I would also say I'm going to accept the analysis of our top intelligence professionals who, at least earlier this year, said Trindalagua, bad guys, Maduro, bad guys, but did not see that linkage, and they were fired because they wouldn't bend their analysis to political purposes. And I can tell you, major allies of America took note of that and basically said to me, when I meet with them regularly, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, one follow-up.
I'm going to get everything.
Senator, it seems like you reached out to the Trump administration yesterday when this news broke. Did they give you the documents as a member of the gang? They didn't?
I've not gotten out. They supposedly are going to make them available now. Bullshit.
And did they say anything else?
No, I think they know they screwed up. But saying they screwed up, if they say they acknowledge they screwed up, fire someone. But the question I've got is, this is a pattern. This is not a one-off. And where in the hell were my Republican senators who we have worked on everything in a bipartisan fashion? Why didn't they say, isn't this a little bit weird that we don't have any Democrats in the room? We're going to go through everything.
You sent a letter along with Representative Himes last week to DNI Gabbard requesting more information on the strikes. Have you received a response to that? And then secondarily, I'm wondering if you can tell us more about what you understand the rationale to be behind yesterday's briefing. Was it to sway holdouts on the War Powers Resolution?
The White House doesn't clue me in on their political strategy. They don't have to do that. They do have to follow the law. And I don't think, we did not receive a response from Gabbard. I'm not sure we've received a response from Gabbard on any missive we've sent since she's been in that office.
So you've not received an explanation why Democrats were excluded from the briefing yesterday?
We got a ham-handed, oh, maybe you're right, whatever. I say bullshit.
Did you
I say this is so outrageous, and it's not, again. When we sit in our we generally, I've been in hundreds and hundreds of these meetings, and almost all the time, you can't tell who's Republican or Democrat because this is about our country's national security. This ought to be our shared responsibility. The idea that we're going to selectively give on a partisan basis only information about putting troops in harm's way, you allow this precedent to stand, and not only are our troops made less safe, but our country's made less safe, and who in the heck around the world is going to really trust us? Yes, ma'am.
Senator Rounds said this morning that he did reach out to the White House afterwards and asked where the Democrats were after he went into the briefing and didn't see anybody there. Have you spoken with him or other Republicans?
I have spoken briefly with Mike Rounds. I have a lot of faith in Mike Rounds. But the question I got to ask everybody is, with all the focus on this issue, with everyone knowing that we've been jointly asking for this information, and we all jointly asked Secretary Rubio from the Gang of Eight meeting, and again, Senator Rounds wasn't in the meeting last week, but why in the heck wouldn't somebody have said, you know what, this is a little weird, what's going on here? Yes, ma'am.
Two quick questions. The first being, have you heard of any of the information? Have any of your Republican colleagues shared with you anything that was in that briefing? And then the second question is, just now in the House Armed Services Committee briefing that was given, one of the representatives came out and said that they were told that as of now, only cocaine has been retrieved, no fentanyl thus far. Is that something that you've heard as well?
I have no information about that, and no, I've not been shared with any of the information. And yes, ma'am.
Based on the information that you've got so far, are you concerned at all about U.S. troops being put in a situation where they're acting on illegal orders? And then also, if you could just speak briefly to any thoughts you have on a direct attack on Venezuela, which President Trump has threatened repeatedly, how you think that might impact things?
I went to law school, I never claimed to be a lawyer. Smarter members than me on legal opinions have raised concerns whether, if these strikes violate international law, could they be in jeopardy? That's why you have an Office of Legal Counsel that's supposed to give the rationale. And dragging your feet, we've been asking for this, not for days or weeks, but I think it's been for months since they started. Not sharing that is, frankly, unprecedented. Promising it and then only sharing it with Republicans? When will there be such an abuse that people will say enough? I don't know. Yes, ma'am, then we'll go to that.
Last month you said that you had a visit to an intelligence agency blocked and rescheduled. Was it rescheduled? Did you ever hear back? And have you attempted to go to any other agency?
I am scheduling with another agency that is in Virginia, a meeting in terms of my normal course of oversight. And again, this was the case again of Ms. Loomer, who was so out of the mainstream that couldn't even get a job in the Trump administration, yet seems to pull Hegseth and Gabbard strings. Again, it was a case after they got caught on this, they tried to cook up a response. That was baloney. We talked about in the Intelligence Committee, and all of my Republican Senate friends said, I'm not going to make a prerequisite that I got to bring a Democrat every time they do their oversight responsibility. Under the rules that the White House proposed, you couldn't, when you're on a Codell, you couldn't visit a CIA station to buck up morale if you didn't bring a bipartisan do. It was, again, such a obvious effort to try to clean up the mess. And I look forward to my visit. I'll invite anybody else that wants to go along. I don't expect anybody else to go along. But if I'm not able to do oversight, and remember, the Intelligence Committee for all, there's only 17 of us in the Senate. There's 27, I think, in the House. If we don't do this job, no other senator, no other congressperson gets the right to do the same kind of oversight. You take that away, and this is how, without oversight, this is how the intelligence community gets in trouble. And I know the intelligence community, they want the oversight. This was not a pushback from any of the professionals. Because I think they want to have, frankly, all of us reinforce the fact that they need to be independent and speak truth to power. And I got to tell you, they are under such pressure at this point. I've never seen anything like this. And again, this makes America less safe.
Senator, do you believe that one of the objectives of this operation is to remove Maduro from power?
I don't know what the final objective is. and again, I'm not gonna, I go back to what I said at the front. Maduro is a bad guy. He is bringing down the Venezuelan people. But if there is an effort, if there is a United States policy to try to remove him, it sure as hell ought to at least be shared with the Gang of Eight. If not, the intelligence committees writ large, and any level of trust by these kind of antics is totally destroyed. On this Office of Legal Counsel opinion, and frankly, on the targeted list, every senator needs to get it, and we're going to keep pushing until it happens. Yes, sir.
In terms of the notification that reportedly the administration's already given to Congress, in which...
Well, what notification are you talking about?
Well, so at the start of this month, reportedly there was a notification that said the administration regarded these as unlawful combatants, non-state armed groups, whose actions constitute an armed attack against the United States. Do you accept that assertion that
Listen,
what they're doing?
I can't make that judgment. I think it will be a stretch. But I would give them the courtesy of saying, show me your legal reasoning on how you got there. They have drugged their feet, promised we'd get it, didn't deliver, and then they share it with a select group of Republican senators only. This is not the way the system's supposed to work.
Can I just follow up very quickly on congressional approval? I mean, presumably your opponents will point to previous presidents who have acted without congressional approval, for example, President Obama in Libya. I mean, do you see a distinction between that kind of action and what's happening now?
We have seen actions done by presidents which are like a single strike, a single action, that circumstances warrant, and generally speaking, I think Congress defers to the president in a moment in time. But this is not some single action. This appears to be a policy that is being carried out over weeks and potentially months. There is no legitimate reason not to share at least the legal opinion, what the goals are, with the American people, frankly, not just the Senate. And I don't think that basic criteria has been met. Yes, ma'am.
Some of your Republican colleagues in the Senate, like Senator Rand Paul, have always been outspoken about this issue. Do you know if they were also included in the briefing, or if it was only people that were on the edge? And do you have a list of people that were included in the briefing?
I don't know if he was.
Based on what you do know right now, do you see parallels between what this administration is trying to do in Venezuela and what previous administrations tried to do in the Middle East?
Well, I don't want to say this. Like, it couldn't be more night and day between Trump 1 and Trump 2. You know, I remember when President Trump and Trump 1, when it appeared he was, there had been a drone shot down. We were, I think the administration was considering a strike on Iran. And President Trump, to his credit, went way beyond what was required. He had the senior leadership of the House and the Senate, not just from intelligence and the Speaker and minority leadership. He had 25 of us in the room and went through. He followed the law. He recognized that if we're going to put Americans in harm's way, it is required that Congress at least get particularly a long-term campaign. All that is obviously out the window right now, and this makes America less safe, and frankly, it further deteriorates relations with our allies, because if they're saying, hold it, you're telling me Congress gets no oversight on the actions of this president, particularly when it appears to be a maybe week-long, maybe month-long campaign, then how do we trust you on anything?
Republicans who have been asked about this morning are saying they're hearing there's going to be another briefing for Democrats.
Bullshit.
Have you heard about that? And
No, I just again. Listen, somebody needs to be held accountable for this. And Trump won, and Biden, and again, following up on the kind of what happened with the Iran strike in the first place. This is a cover your tracks, try to damage the fallout. Yeah. What do I tell people in Virginia about, because we got a heck of a lot. And the carrier that has just been dispatched is homeported in Norfolk. I had questions this week from folks in Hampton Roads. Senator, tell us what's going on. What's our goal? What's our objective? We've seen how this administration treats the safety of our sailors with the stupidity around Signalgate. and not even treating classified information appropriately. The fact that we are putting potentially those sailors in harm's way right now, and they're not even gonna say what their legal justification is, let alone their policy justification. Again, is there no line that gets broken that people won't say enough? How much blind loyalty to this administration versus obligation to the American people will our Republican senators be willing to push back? And I give Mike Rounds credit, but I think somebody should have walked out of the meeting yesterday. I can tell you this, I would never participate in a meeting like that.
These questions that you're raising about your Republican colleagues, have you raised these directly with any of them since yesterday?
I have been raised the undermining of the independence of the IC for months. In a skiff. In a place where we are confidential with each other. And frankly, the reaction I get is I get a lot of, well, you're right, Mark, and kind of a hangdog look.
All right, folks. Our 7 to 9 o'clock stream will be back tonight at 11.